Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hello, good afternoon. The Prime Minister has insisted that the special relationship is as strong as it's ever been and that Donald Trump's state visit to the UK will go ahead. Theresa May is due to meet the US President after her speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos later this afternoon.
She's expected to warn technology companies that they must crack down on illegal and harmful content online. Our business correspondent, Adam Parsons, joins us now from Davos. What else can we expect from the Prime Minister today, Adam?
Well, she's got a couple of very important things. Number one is that speech to Congress here in Davos. Pretty prestigious occasion. The audience, as we know, is full of significant business individuals, investors and politicians. And in that speech, she is expected to talk about extremist and harmful and illegal content that appears on social media. And she will say that those companies, the likes of Facebook and Twitter, need to do more to remove that content and to remove it quicker. And I think, very interestingly, what we're expecting her to say is that investors in those companies should also think about withdrawing their investment if they're not happy with the way that those social media giants are reacting to complaints. In other words, hit them where it hurts, which is in the pocket. Now, that will get a lot of attention, but I suspect that Mrs May knows that the more important thing she will do here in Davos are the meetings that she's going to have on the sidelines. They call them bilaterals here in Davos, and she's got a big one because she will be sitting down very shortly after she finishes her speech in a room in the Congress Centre just around the corner with President Donald Trump. It's really his first big engagement here in Davos. He arrived this morning on Air Force One and then flew up here straight away. And in that meeting with President Trump, she will be talking about a lot of things. You know that she has already said that she continues to extend that invitation for him to visit the United Kingdom. But I think a lot of focus will be on the idea of a free trade agreement following Brexit. Going to be extremely crucial for the UK economy that those free trade agreements are delivered. You'll remember yesterday Tony Blair told Sky News that he thought the UK-US relationship would be more important than ever. He said it could be even dependent. So I would expect Mrs May to go into that meeting with the front of her mind a free trade agreement. The good news for her and for the negotiating team that she brings with her is that already this morning Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, effectively the Chancellor of the United States, held a briefing, which some of us went to talk to him and to Wilbur Ross, the US Commerce Secretary. And Mr Mnuchin made it very clear that in his words, the UK was at the front of the line and not the back of the line when it came to a free trade deal. And he said it would be an attractive deal between the US and the UK. So I suspect that Mrs May will go into that meeting with some confidence. Worth saying that President Trump is holding meetings with a number of leaders. So is Mrs May. Yesterday she met the Swiss president after arriving in Davos, and she will continue those meetings. But let's be honest, the focus of her attention will be considerably on what President Trump says to her and what she says in return.
Indeed. And Adam, on the point of the keynote speech, which we are expecting in the next few minutes or so, she's talking about a very specific subject, which is technology. There are many people asking why she's not laying out her vision for Britain come Brexit.
Yeah, it's very interesting that because we've already seen a lot of leaders standing up here doing exactly that, whether it was Angela Merkel with something of an attack on protectionism, whether it was Emmanuel Macron talking about politics from the centre. Justin Trudeau, actually, as it happened early on in the piece, talked about other topics as well. But it is fascinating that Mrs May, instead of laying out her vision for what a post-Brexit Britain looks like, has picked social media. I think we can go to the Congress Centre now. You can hear exactly what she's going to say. Let's join Theresa May.
Last year on this platform, I argued that the benefits of free trade were not being felt by all. And I warned that the failure of political and business leaders to address this threatened to undermine popular support for the entire rules-based system on which our global security and prosperity depends. But I also argued that we could change this. not by turning our backs on free trade or the global rules-based system, which together have delivered the greatest advances in prosperity we have ever known, but rather by doubling down on them and acting to ensure that the global economy works for everyone. 1 year on, I believe there are grounds for optimism. Global growth has continued to strengthen, with the IMF estimating that global output last year grew by 3.7%. The populism of the far left and far right has not made the progress that some had predicted. And in the UK, we've seen productivity rising, unemployment at its lowest rate for over 40 years, and more examples of government and business working together to bring new jobs and opportunities to communities across our country. We've also seen important progress on global trade. The UK has been at the forefront of championing new trade deals, including the EU's deals with Canada and Japan. The G20 has agreed commitments to tackle overcapacity in steel, and the World Trade Organization has made progress towards launching plurilateral discussions on digital trade. And as we leave the European Union, the UK will continue to be a global advocate of free trade, pushing for progress on WTO discussions, seeking to bring new partners to the table, and of course, after we have left the EU, developing new bilateral deals with countries across the world. But there is much more to be done by the whole international community. And frankly, too often our rhetoric in support of free trade here in Davos is not matched by our actions. The commitments on steel must be implemented. Like the UK, other big aid donors should support developing countries to ensure they can harness the benefits of global growth. And the World Trade Organization still needs to go much further in its reforms, ensuring its rulebook keeps pace with developments in the global economy. For example, services made up 64% of global GDP, yet while some recent trade negotiations are achieving more ambitious outcomes on services, the Trade in Services Agreement remains stalled. And while the likes of eBay, Amazon, and Alibaba have grown into global giants, taking on a central role in the lives of billions around the world, the WTO has been struggling to remove barriers to e-commerce trade for almost 20 years. Progress on these issues really matters, because technological advances continue to revolutionize the possibilities for humanity, and we must have the international frameworks in place to ensure everyone can benefit from them. Already, access to the internet has been estimated to have the potential to generate over $2.2 trillion in additional GDP and more than 140 million new jobs in developing countries alone. While nearly 35% of the adult population in sub-Saharan Africa has a mobile money account, the highest percentage in the world. And now the impact of technology is growing in ways that even a few years ago we could not have imagined. Just last week, a drone saved 2 boys drowning off the coast of Australia by carrying a flotation device to them. The use of artificial intelligence is transforming healthcare. In one test, machine learning reduced the number of unnecessary surgeries for breast cancer by 1/3. The development of speech recognition and translation is reaching a level where we will be able to go anywhere in the world and communicate using our native language. While British-based companies like Ripjar are pioneering the use of data science and artificial intelligence to protect companies from money laundering, fraud, cybercrime, and terrorism. In all these ways, harnessing the power of technology is not just in all our interests, but fundamental to the advance of humanity. But this technological progress also raises new and profound challenges which we need to address. For example, many fear that because of technology, they and their children will lose out on the jobs of the future. And they worry too about how new technologies might be exploited by those with malevolent intentions, and what that could mean for the safety and well-being of their families and children. So today, I'm going to make the case for how we can best harness the huge potential of technology, but also how we address these profound concerns so that technology is the force for progress that we all know it can be. Right across the long sweep of history, from the invention of electricity, the advent of factory production, time and again, initially disquieting innovations have delivered previously unthinkable advances, and we have found the way to make those changes work for all our people. Now we must find the way to do so again. Let me start with how we can embrace technology. Key to this is channeling the power of government and business in partnership to seize the opportunities of technology and create high-quality, well-paid jobs right across the world. That is why in the UK, I've put the development of a modern industrial strategy at the heart of the government's agenda. It's a new long-term approach to shaping a stronger and fairer economy, and it understands what government and business each bring to the table. Because I understand the power of business as a force for good. I know that it is free and competitive markets that drive the innovation, creativity and risk-taking that have enabled so many of the great advances of our time. But I also understand the good that government can do, creating the conditions where successful businesses can emerge and grow, and helping them to invest in the future of our nation. So the message of our industrial strategy to the world is clear. Britain will be one of the best places in the world in which to start and grow a business. The strategy gets the fundamentals right. It drives investment in infrastructure at a local as well as a national level. And it equips our people with the skills they need and the skills business needs to be successful in a changing global economy. For if we are to retain popular support for the rules-based system, we have to stop and understand, sitting up here in these mountains in Davos, what it can really feel like for someone who has worked for 20 years and who now finds that the job they know how to do today is not going to be a job that needs doing in the future. And the answer isn't to pretend we can sit back and leave it to the labour market alone to resolve. We need to act decisively to help people benefit from global growth now. And that is why, as part of our industrial strategy, there is a focus on supporting new jobs and industries that build on the strengths of local communities. For example, on our East Coast, Hull is getting behind offshore wind, generating hundreds of jobs in partnership with Siemens. And just as we act to help support new jobs today, so we also need to help people secure the jobs of tomorrow. So we're establishing a technical education system that rivals the best in the world, alongside our world-class higher education system. We're developing a national retraining scheme to help people learn throughout their career. And we're establishing an Institute of Coding, a consortium of more than 60 universities, businesses and industry experts to support training that will help people secure new opportunities in the digital economy. But this strategy and partnership with business goes further than getting the fundamentals of our economy right. It also seeks to get us on the front foot in seizing the opportunities of technology for tomorrow. We're delivering the UK's biggest ever increase in public investment in research and development, which could increase public and private R&D investment by as much as £80 billion over the next 10 years. We're at the forefront of the development, manufacture and use of low-carbon technologies. We're using technology to support the needs of an ageing society, for example by employing powerful data sets to help diagnose and treat illnesses earlier. And we're establishing the UK as a world leader in artificial intelligence, building on the success of British companies like DeepMind. For I believe we've only just seen the beginning of what AI can achieve. Imagine a world in which self-driving cars radically reduce the number of deaths on our roads. Imagine a world where remote monitoring and inspection of critical infrastructure makes dangerous jobs safer. Imagine a world where we can predict and prevent the spread of diseases around the globe. These are the kind of advances that we could see and that we should want to see. Already, the UK is recognised as first in the world for our preparedness to bring artificial intelligence into public service delivery. We have seen a new AI startup created in the UK every week for the last 3 years. And we're investing in the skills these startups need, spending £45 million to support additional PhDs in AI and related disciplines, and creating at least 200 extra places a year by 2020-21. We're absolutely determined to make our country the place to come and set up to seize the opportunities of artificial intelligence for the future. But as we seize these opportunities of technology, so we also have to shape this change to ensure it works for everyone, be that in people's jobs or their daily lives. Already, technology is changing the nature of our workplaces and leaving many people with less predictable working patterns. So we need to make sure that our employment law keeps pace with the way that technology is shaping modern working practices. Take the example of Uber, a groundbreaking use of technology that has radically changed how people move around in cities across the world. But also a company that has got things wrong along the way, with safety issues and concerns over the protections for its workers. The answer isn't to shut Uber down, but rather to address those concerns and to establish and enforce the standards and protections that can make this technology work for customers and employees alike. So employment law needs to preserve vital rights and protections and the flexibilities that businesses and workers value. But we must make sure those flexibilities really do work for everyone and don't become a one-sided deal that can become exploitative. And that's at the heart of the review that Matthew Taylor conducted for the UK government last year. And we will be working to deliver on it, from exploring the case for reforms to make our employment status test clearer, to identifying a set of metrics against which to measure job quality. Just as people need to feel that technological change in the workplace is to their benefit, so we need to ensure that they have faith that the increasing role of technology throughout their lives is enhancing the opportunities they have and the world in which they live. Technologies like the internet were developed with a philosophy that connecting us together would improve people's lives. And in many ways they have. But so far, that hasn't been completely true for everyone. Just this week, a survey in the UK has found that 7 in 10 people believe social media companies do not do enough to stop illegal or unethical behaviour on their platforms, prevent the sharing of extremist content, or do enough to prevent bullying. The loss of trust is hugely damaging, and it is in all our interests to address it. In some areas, that means we will need new rules and legislation. In others, such as online hatred and bullying, we need norms and expectations of how civilised people should interact in ways that can't be achieved through legislation. The digital charter we are developing in the UK sets out the principles of our approach to agree the rights and responsibilities of the online world and to put them into practice. It is profoundly pro-business because it seeks to support digital businesses in securing the trust and public confidence that they need. At its heart is a set of principles that the same rights people have offline should be protected online, that the internet should remain free, open and accessible, that people should understand the rules that apply to them when they are online, that personal data should be respected and used appropriately, that protection should be in place to help keep people safe online, especially children, and that the social and economic benefits brought by new technologies should be fairly shared. And underpinning all of this is our determination to make the UK a world leader in innovation-friendly regulation. Regulation that will make the UK the best place to start and grow a digital business, but also the safest place to be online. But when technology platforms work across geographical boundaries, no one country and no one government alone can deliver the international norms, rules and standards for a global digital world. Technology companies themselves, investors and all our international partners need to play their part. First, technology companies still need to do more in stepping up to their responsibilities for dealing with harmful and illegal online activity. Companies simply cannot stand by while their platforms are used to facilitate child abuse, modern slavery, or the spreading of terrorist and extremist content. We've made some progress. Last September at the UN, I joined President Macron and Prime Minister Gentiloni in convening the first ever UN summit of government and industry to move further and faster in reducing the time it takes to remove terrorist content online and to increase significantly their efforts to stop it being uploaded in the first place. But we need to go further so that ultimately this content is removed automatically. These companies have some of the best brains in the world. They must focus their brightest and best on meeting these fundamental social responsibilities. And just as these big companies need to step up, so we also need cross-industry responses, because smaller platforms can quickly become home to criminals and terrorists. We have seen that happen with Telegram, and we need to see more cooperation from smaller platforms like this. No one wants to be known as the terrorist's platform or the first choice app for paedophiles. As governments, it is also right that we look at the legal liability that social media companies have for the content shared on their sites. The status quo is increasingly unsustainable as it becomes clear these platforms are no longer just passive hosts. But applying the existing standards of liability for publishers is not straightforward. So we need to consider what is most appropriate for the modern economy. We are already working with our European and international partners, as well as the businesses themselves, to understand how we can make the existing frameworks and definitions work better, and to assess in particular whether there is a case for developing a new definition for these platforms, and we will continue to do so. Second, investors can play a vital role by considering the social impact of the companies they are investing in. This is fundamental to the proper functioning of markets, choice and competition. Shareholders should care about these social impacts because the business model of a company is not sustainable if it does not command public support and consent. And they can use their influence to ensure these issues are taken seriously. For example, earlier this month, a group of shareholders demanded that Facebook and Twitter disclose more information about sexual harassment, fake news, hate speech, and other forms of abuse that take place on the company's platforms. So investors can make a big difference here by ensuring trust and safety issues are being properly considered, and I urge them to do so. Third, in a global digital age, we need the norms and rules we establish to be shared by all. That includes establishing the rules and standards that can make the most of artificial intelligence in a responsible way, such as by ensuring that algorithms don't perpetuate the human biases of their developers. So we want our new world-leading Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation to work closely with international partners to build a common understanding of how to ensure the safe, ethical and innovative deployment of artificial intelligence. And I'm delighted that the UK will also be joining the World Economic Forum's new Council on Artificial Intelligence to help shape global governance and applications of this new technology. Many leaders this week are setting out defences of globalisation, open economies, free trade and technological progress, while grappling with how to ensure these operate fairly for all our countries and all our people. The test of leadership, however, is what action we take. And I am clear about three things. First, the critical nature of international cooperation within the global rules-based system. For every country must support and shape the rules for free and fair trade and investment. We cannot pull in different directions. Second, that we have to do more to help our people in the changing global economy, to rebuild their trust in technology as a driver of progress and ensure no one is left behind as we take the next leap forwards. But third, above all, we have to remember that the risks and challenges we face do not outweigh the opportunities. And in seeking to refresh the rules to meet the challenges of today, we must not miss out on the prize for tomorrow. For the forces of free trade and technological progress which have brought us to this point are as nothing in comparison to their potential to enrich the lives of our children and grandchildren. The United Kingdom has a proud history of stepping up, seizing the opportunities of our time and shaping the international rules and partnerships that can deliver progress for all. We stand ready to do so again. So together, let us renew our commitment to cooperation across governments, business, investors and society at large. And let us set ourselves on a path to deliver prosperity and growth for the benefit of all our people, now and for generations to come. Thank you.
Well, that was the Prime Minister there speaking in Davos. Some of the key points, she spoke about the case for how we can best harness new technology, how we address the concerns that come with that. She also spoke about channeling the power of governments and business working in partnership to create jobs and shaping a stronger and fairer economy. Let's speak to our political correspondent, Tom Rayner, who's also been monitoring the Prime Minister's speech in Davos there. Key points for you, Tom?
Well, I think, look, she was returning to a theme. She spoke at the UN General Assembly last year. She raised that in the speech about this same issue, about the opportunity and potential that technological advances offer, but that the world, as it looks at how the world is changing, and world leaders, of course they are those in Davos that she is addressing, and business leaders, need to be conscious of the impact and the potential risks that come with technological developments. She said that we must shape change to ensure it works for everyone. She talked about the government's planned industrial strategy, how it was hoping to focus new jobs and new businesses into areas where there are already local communities with strengths to offer that. But she did say that it is incumbent upon political leaders and indeed business leaders to be aware of the impact that these changes have. So she was talking about the idea that someone who has worked in the same job for 20 years might be finding themselves in a situation where that job is no longer needed as a result of artificial intelligence, and suggesting that it is the job of politicians to be aware of that and to start thinking about that, because a lack of trust and a lack of confidence in technological advances undermine the benefits that they had. She cited specific examples as well about things that could be done in terms of new businesses like Uber, where she said it's transformed the way that people get around, but there are concerns about the business. She said it's not an answer to simply suggest that a company like Uber should be shut down, but instead that there must be new focus on employment laws, for example, to ensure that those who work for Uber are properly protected under the law. She also said that the status quo with regards to how, say, social media...
It was a much anticipated meeting, the first time Theresa May and President Trump had seen each other since an online spat over tweets from the far-right group Britain First. That was followed swiftly by the President cancelling a visit to London to open the new US embassy. But today, in the Swiss resort of Davos, the pair insisted the special relationship was as strong as ever. The President told Mrs May that he loved her country and expected to see a tremendous increase in trade between the UK and the US. From Davos, here's Kamal Ahmed.
He arrived at lunchtime, a blizzard of rotor blades and chutzpah. The president was here, and the World Economic Forum better sit up and take notice. He said he was here to spread peace and prosperity.
Very excited to be here. We're very happy to be here. The United States is doing very well.
And there was one leader Donald Trump said he would be most delighted to meet.
The Prime Minister and myself have had a really great relationship, although some people don't necessarily believe that, but I can tell you it's true. I have a tremendous respect for the Prime Minister and the job she's doing. And I think the feeling is mutual from the standpoint of liking each other a lot.
The PM, not quite as loud a presence in Davos today, said she agreed.
As you say, we've had a great discussion today, and we continue to have that really special relationship between the UK and the United States, standing shoulder to shoulder, because we're facing the same challenges across the world. And as you say, we're working together to defeat those challenges and to meet them. And alongside that, working for a good trade relationship in the future, which will be to both our benefits.
Theresa May has faced some rocky moments with the man in the White House, but this wasn't a time to remember those critical tweets about terror or cancelled official visits.
He walked through here like a rock star, the first US president to visit the World Economic Forum since Bill Clinton in the year 2000. The big and difficult question for Theresa May is this: politically, economically, how close does she want to get to this most controversial of big beasts?
There is a contrast in style, certainly, but the UK needs America, especially as Britain plots its exit from the European Union.
They're not on the same page. America, as you know, has a strong relationship with the United Kingdom over time, and Theresa May can't afford to sever that by objecting too much.
One of the world's leading bankers explained why Trump was a hit.
The alternative to Trump would have been more regulation, higher taxes. Instead, we have lower taxes, less regulation. I think that's stimulative to the market. There's a lot of collateral effects, and people debate that. And so I haven't thrown all in necessarily that everything is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Theresa May left Davos tonight, back to the UK and domestic matters. Tomorrow, the president's big speech on America, trade, and putting the US first. Kamal Ahmed, BBC News, Davos.
In a moment, we'll speak to our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, in Westminster. But first, our North America editor, John Sopel, is in Davos. So, John, is that it? We're all friends again?
Oh, yeah, I think that, a huge rapprochement has taken place. Although Donald Trump was saying, troubles in our relationship, that is almost fake news. It's a false rumour, he said. And he has since tweeted that it was a very positive meeting that he had with Theresa May. And look at what's maybe coming out of it. Downing Street saying the PM and President concluded by asking officials to work together on finalising the details of a visit by the President to the UK later this year. A visit, no mention of it being a state visit. And of course, on the British side, they thought they had a visit locked in for February when Donald Trump was going to come and open the new US embassy. And then he decided he wasn't coming. So I don't think the British side will be taking anything for granted. But look, Britain needs America if there's going to be a trade deal post-Brexit. There were very positive words, not just from Theresa May, not just from Donald Trump, but also from Steve Mnuchin, the US Treasury Secretary. That's all good. Atmospherics help a great deal. The mood helps a great deal. But the details of trade negotiations are immensely complicated, and ultimately it's an arm wrestle. And who needs that trade deal more? Britain or the United States?
And meanwhile, Laura, Brexit causing the Prime Minister more headaches in Davos today.
Well, that's right, Sophie. During all that hobnobbing, Theresa May's party seemed to actually be doing its best to try to drag her back to their own divisions over Brexit. None other than the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, on stage in Davos today, said that ultimately he hoped that the two economies, the EU and the UK, would only be very modestly apart. Now, that kind of comment about staying really close to the rest of the continent after Brexit horrifies many people on the Tory backbenches, including one leading Brexiteer, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who in his speech tonight will accuse ministers of being cowed by the EU, will say that they're just managing decline and that calling for the government to change its tone on Brexit fundamentally. Now, this might just sound like a bit of a spat, a bit of a war of words, but this goes right to the heart of Theresa May's struggle to stick her party together over its biggest project, how and when, exactly how we leave the European Union. Now, broadly, the majority of MPs and certainly the majority of ministers think that she is the only person, although it seems grim, who is actually able to do this. But the mood in Westminster in the last couple of weeks in the Tory party has turned pretty sour. One senior Conservative said to me today they're even in the mood for regime change. I don't think we're about to slip into any kind of enormous battle, but certainly things feel very tricky for number 10, however many smiles there were with President Trump.
Our political editor Laura Kunsberg in Westminster and our North America editor John Sopel in Davos. Thank you both.
Well, now let's move on to the rest of the day's news. And Donald Trump has made plans with Theresa May to visit the UK later this year. The president met the Prime Minister at the World Economic Forum in Davos and scotched rumours of a rift in the so-called special relationship. He told Mrs May, "We love your country." From Davos, here's our business editor, Joel Hills.
Britain takes pride in its special relationship with the United States. Some doubt it still exists, but President Trump insists there's still something there.
So that was a little bit of a false rumor out there. I just wanted to correct it, frankly, because we have great respect for everything you're doing, and we love your country. We think it's truly great.
And we continue to have that really special relationship between the UK and the United States. It's standing shoulder to shoulder because we're facing the same challenges across the world. And as you say, we're working together to defeat those challenges and to meet them.
As Trump promised a tremendous increase in trade post-Brexit, everyone watched to see if the body language matched the warm words. Many believe relations between Theresa May and Donald Trump had turned as chilly as the Davos weather. The two of them appeared to fall out on Twitter 2 months ago after he retweeted a video from a far-right group. But before her meeting, the Prime Minister insisted all was well.
Please welcome the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Theresa May was here to talk technology and talk up Britain as a place to do business. Some in the crowd were hoping for more.
She didn't mention Brexit specifically, and that was a little bit surprising. I think everyone was expecting that.
But the star attraction today, and from the moment he arrived, was President Trump. As he swept through the World Economic Forum, crowds formed.
Who is coming?
Oh, Donald Trump.
It's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Oh, you thought it was Theresa May?
Oh, that's what he did.
This is what power looks like. In the crowd here were business leaders and politicians. For a moment, Davos became Versailles.
Peace and prosperity.
The Sun King makes his speech tomorrow.
I already am.
A special relationship with the United States, the world's largest economy, is a useful thing for Britain to have, not least because the process of Brexit is testing relationships elsewhere in Europe. So tonight, Washington and London both insist that relationship remains intact. As for the state visit that President Trump has yet to pay, a working visit will happen to Britain before the end of the year.
OK, Joel Hills in Davos, thank you.
March 2019, Britain leaves the EU, but during the transition, it could still have to abide by EU laws, and the UK might only have a very limited right to make an appearance at meetings, with no voting rights. All this revealed in a copy of the EU's negotiating guidelines for the next stage of the Brexit discussions, due to start next week, which this programme has obtained. Predictably enough, MPs campaigning for a hard Brexit are not happy. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has this exclusive report.
Many business and political leaders in Davos would like to have heard Theresa May spell out her position on Britain's future relationship with the EU. They will have left this speech disappointed.
Today, I'm going to make the case for how we can best harness the huge potential of technology.
But no one else is ready to change the subject. Her Chancellor told an off-camera gathering he hoped post-Brexit Britain would move very modestly apart from the EU, adding to nerves back in Westminster already jangled by the appearance of this document, the EU's negotiating guidelines for the transition. They say the UK will have to abide by all EU laws, even new ones as yet unwritten. They say the transition must end on the last day of 2020, and they confirm Britain will lose all its voting powers in the EU, though it could be invited to attend and speak at some meetings of the EU's choice, including on fisheries.
A right to be heard and no more. A right to be heard, a right to a voice, but not a vote. But we always knew that was going to be how a transition would work. I mean, the transition is a British request. British businesses and financial firms are really desperate for a transition.
How gracious that we should have a right to be heard if we behave ourselves well and wash our hands before paying obeisance to the grand tantrums of the European Union.
Some Tory Brexiteers are saying that senior civil servants have got a grip on Theresa May and are steering her towards a new relationship with Europe that looks far too much like the transition itself. As so often with uprisings like this, its leaders are proclaiming loyalty to the leader of the party. They're simply trying to help Theresa May maintain her own red lines on Brexit. But there's more than a whiff of menace to this.
She went to the country on a manifesto saying that that is what she would do and reinforcing what she had said in Lancaster House, saying we would be out of the customs union and out of the single market. I expect prime ministers, and particularly Theresa May, who has a reputation for honest dealing, to stick to her own words, and I'm vigorously backing and supporting the prime minister.
Or what she said once before. You sense there's slippage in the government from the Lancaster House position, don't you?
None as yet from the prime minister. But perhaps there are councillors around her who do not always say what the Prime Minister has authorised them to say.
Theresa May and Davos had another engagement to negotiate first. President Trump arrived in the Swiss resort. There was much iPhone gawking.
Are you going to be received well? I already am. Look, you take a look. You tell me.
This was their first meeting since a spat on Twitter when she condemned him for retweeting content from Britain First. Theresa May nodded as President Trump suggested the falling out was fake news.
The Prime Minister and myself have had a really great relationship, although some people don't necessarily believe that, but I can tell you it's true. I have a tremendous respect for the Prime Minister and the job she's doing, and I think the feeling is mutual from the standpoint of liking each other a lot. And so that was a little bit of a false rumor out there. I just wanted to correct it, frankly, because we have great respect for everything you're doing, and we love your country. We think it's truly good.
The UK and the US both do well out of this. And it's been great to see you tonight.
Good. Well, it's great to see you. One thing that will be taking place over a number of years will be trade. The trade is going to increase many times.
The number 10 team has been keeping in close touch with the Brexit Secretary from Switzerland as he prepares a speech tomorrow back home, laying out Britain's demands for the transition. Brexiteers have been told they'll like it, but some don't sound at all convinced.
Gary Gibbon reporting. Well, after their Davos meeting, Downing Street said that Theresa May and Donald Trump have asked officials to begin finalising the details of a visit by the President to the UK later this year. Live now to our Washington correspondent, Kylie Morris. Kylie.
Yes, John, this on-again, off-again visit is apparently now on again. But will it be a full state visit? I think that's the interesting thing that's emerging from beyond this meeting. We understand from British government sources that aides are now discussing what sort of a visit it will be, whether it should be a full state occasion or a lower key working trip, to use their words. Interestingly, the White House, in its readout of the meeting, describes the visit as a working visit and not a state visit. So potentially the president does come along, but he doesn't arrive with the usual kind of pomp and circumstance that one might expect. In any case, in some shape or form, the US president will be coming to the UK later this year. We're told most likely in the second half of the year. Now, beyond those discussions about the visit, of course, they talked about other things. They talked about trade, as you heard in Gary's report, but also other issues that they have in common. Iran, which is a very contentious and difficult issue, in fact, between the two countries, given that the US wants to pull out, or at least Donald Trump wants to pull the US out of the Iran deal. The UK wants to stay in. That was discussed. We don't know, though, what the outcome of those discussions were.
Kylie Morris in Washington. Well, Joining us now, Conservative MP Bernard Jenkin, who campaigned to leave the EU, and from South London, the Labour MP Chuka Umunna, who is a supporter of the anti-hard Brexit campaign group Open Britain. Bernard Jenkin, are you happy with this transitional period?
Well, I don't think anybody could be happy with it. I mean, I'm chairman of the Constitution Committee in the House of Commons, and to put the United Kingdom in a position where we're going to be possibly imposed with new laws, where we have no veto or Parliament has no role in helping to decide those laws, and where the European Court of Justice, on which we will have no representation, can adjudicate on EU law, it's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And I think we need to see what safeguards there are in place to ensure that we're not just subjecting ourselves to foreign rule during that period. And of course, it will only be worth it if the deal at the end of it is what we really want. Otherwise, it will not be worth it.
Chuka Umunna, you presumably are in favour of this.
I think having a transition period is absolutely necessary, because you need to give, in particular, our businesses time to plan for us to decouple from the EU, which is so intertwined with our economy. I think clearly, looking back with hindsight, it was reckless and ill-advised to trigger Article 50 so quickly, and then also to waste time on a general election, which has taken up precious time that could have been spent actually preparing to work out what the final destination will be. I mean, you'll know on your show, John, that often ministers talk about this transition phase being an implementation period, but they've got no idea what they want to implement because the Cabinet can't agree on the end state that they want. But the bottom line with transition is it's no safe harbour. We're still faced with jumping off a cliff at the end of the transition period within 2 years of leaving. The Prime Minister's red lines dictate that we leave the single market and the customs union, although she put that to the electorate last year and lost her majority, and that will do immeasurable damage to your viewers' jobs and livelihoods. And this transition period is not really going to stop that. It's not long enough, by the way, this transition period either.
Well, now, Bernard Jenkin, the Chancellor, your Chancellor, has said this is only a very modest change in our relationship with Europe. Is that where we're going now? Modest change?
Well, I think it's unfortunate the Chancellor does sometimes give the impression that he's pursuing a different policy from the Prime Minister. For example, the CBI are definitely campaigning for the United Kingdom to stay in the customs union. And there's several occasions in his speech where he says, I welcome Carolyn Fairburn's speech, I agree with Carolyn Fairburn. It's clearly giving a rather unfortunate impression. The Prime Minister has always been very clear that we're leaving the single market and customs union, that we're going to conclude a comprehensive trade agreement.
It's a very rare moment to hear a Conservative MP of some prestige decrying the CBI. It was also thought to be a bit of a friend.
Well, actually, the CBI has been wrong. I seem to remember Margaret Thatcher having a bit of a tussle with the CBI when they opposed her economic policy. Of course, she turned out to be right, and the CBI turned out to be wrong.
So do you see the CBI as an enemy of Brexit?
Yes, of course, they campaigned against Brexit. They campaigned for Remain very vociferously. They were wrong about the exchange rate mechanism as well. They were in favour of that, and they were wrong about that. They've been wrong very often, and of course they are funded by the European Union. And one wonders whether the European Union sometimes influences what they say.
Chuka Umunna.
This is ridiculous, and I think Bernard, and I can't see him, but I imagine he's got a wry smile on his face. It's rather ludicrous. But the CBI represent your viewers' employers. These are the people who actually do trade. They're the ones who provide jobs. Yes, they do, and actually they don't just represent large businesses, they represent small business as well. And just to dismiss them and say that we should ignore them and that your Chancellor should ignore them is something extraordinary. And one of the things I'd say to your viewers, actually, which is unusual here. Hang on just a moment. But one of the things that's unusual is not only do you have the CBI arguing that we should stay part of the customs union, but you've also got the Trade Union Congress, the TUC, that represent employees in this country, arguing the same thing too.
All right,
I think tells you something.
Before I go to Bernard Jenkin, let me clarify then. Does Mr Corbyn support remaining in the customs union? Does the Labour Party advocate remaining in the customs union? Chuka Umunna.
At the moment, that... Well, certainly tonally, that seems to be the direction that we're headed.
Well, isn't it time you broke away from tone and told us some actual facts? Well, Does the Labour Party do it or not?
Can I come in here?
Well, we have committed to let me answer the question. I'm the Labour MP here. Look, we've committed to staying part of the customs union and part of the single market during this transition phase. Brilliant. But as I said, it's no safe harbour. And I'm absolutely clear what we want to see. We want to see the Labour Party commit to us staying in the single market and the customs union permanently.
You want to see that? Does Mr Corbyn want to see it? Yes or no?
Let's be absolutely clear.
Yes or no? Does Mr Corbyn
want to see it? Well, the jury's out. I don't know, John, but I hope that he will go there. All of our trade unions are arguing, you know, trade union movements are arguing for it, the TUC's arguing for it, our members are arguing for it.
Let me go to your adversary.
Let's take a lead and do the best thing to save people's jobs.
Your lead now, Mr Jenkin.
It won't save people's jobs. If we stay in the customs union, it would be the tail wagging the dog once again. It would be a relatively small part of the economy dictating to the rest of the economy, where the big opportunities for the British economy outside the EU are by being free to set our own tariff rates and to do our own trade deals with very large economies like the United States. And I recently heard from a former member of the Obama administration how it would be far easier for the UK to do a free trade deal with the United States than for the United States to do one with the EU. This is the future. The rest of the world's growing much faster than the EU.
Bernard Jenkins, Shukran Amuna, thank you both very warmly for coming out to talk to us, or staying in to talk to us. Thanks a lot.